We reached the zenith of our existence on the earth because of the buffalo.
Bison really managed to become the main grazer of the continent, and they stretched, literally sea to sea.
One way of sort of attempt at cultural genocide was to mass kill a lot of the buffalo that existed during that time.
There's reports of men coming out and shooting 100 buffalo in one day and doing nothing but taking their tongues.
A lot of those herds, it took a long time for them to then be revived.
We're taking these buffalo, these bison, which are part of the land, and returning them home.
The buffalo is still returning, and to be able to bring that back and support that growth in a very sustainable, thoughtful way is really important.
We're hoping to continue to conserve bison in their historical landscapes and really help use that traditional ecological knowledge, that indigenous knowledge, to help with managing these bison into the future.
It's about having our own sovereignty and saying we're native and we deserve to have the bison here in abundance for us and our people.
The most important part about who we are as a people is we're buffalo people. And that buffalo is absolutely sacred to us.
The buffalo is a very sacred animal, and we almost consider them as a relative to my culture and my people, the Lakota people. Especially when I make eye contact with one, it's almost like that's my relative.
Part of that relationship is a spiritual relationship. The spirit of that buffalo and my spirit can interact with each other and understand each other. And the reason why they're sacred to us is we believe that we came from another world. And when we came into this world, we were part of a molecular structure that hit the earth, and we were driven under the ground at Wind Cave and evolved from there. And the buffalo were the first to come out above the ground, and they knew we were having a hard time. So they asked us to come out, and they said they would take care of us as a relative.
Within my tribe and Lakota people in general, the buffalo is very centric to who we are, and so I just hold them in really high regard, and I have a lot of respect for who they are, what they represent, and how they are just the providers to my people.
Prior to the invasion, we had a good life. We had a really good life.
The history of Colorado is very unique and very, very important. Before it was Colorado, this was Indian country, and it still is. And so in many respects, it's especially, I'll even use the term sacred to a lot of people, particularly Cheyenne or Arapaho. This was, by treaty, their land. I'm Kiowa. This was our land as well.
One of the reasons they came here was because as the buffalo herds in the north, in the fall they would move south because the grazing is going to be better to the south. So as the buffalo were moving south into this area, Indian people would follow them, and we would have a big gathering in the fall. The Kiowas, the Comanches, the Kiowa Apaches, the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and the Lakota people would all gather, and they would have a big meeting and feast, and they would dance, and then they'd split up and they'd all go hunt all the areas around here where they're buffalo.
So the more people understand who we are, that we are still here, the tie to what made tribes and their tribal members who they are through the language and everything is all tied to the land in some respect.
One thing about Colorado is that there are roughly 50 tribal nations that the Colorado Commission of Indian Affairs recognizes as historically connected tribal nations of this region.
And these people relied on bison herds on the prairie. They would follow the bison herds through this Front Range area, as well as following the waterways in this Front Range area. So bison are very integral to this prairie ecosystem and to the people who were and will continue to be here.
The buffalo are important to us spiritually. We are caretakers of the earth, and as caretakers, we want to show respect to all living things. So that's sort of our relationship with the bison. It's not just some creature out there. It's a part of our families, a part of our spiritual tradition. It's super important.
Here's these people living here that, been living here for thousands of years, and somehow we get discovered, and they started calling us American Indians, and it was a misnomer. I mean, it wasn't accurate, it didn't really have any real grounding in it, but that's what we were called. And the same with the buffalo. The buffalo were called bison, that's their scientific name, but they were more commonly known as buffalo.
One of the reasons that there's this confusion is that buffalo tend to be in Eurasia, Africa, and they're very similar animals. They occupy a similar place in the ecosystem. And so when the earliest European explorers were coming to this continent, they were grasping for a way to describe this animal. And the closest they could come to was the buffalo that was familiar from Eurasia and Africa.
A lot of people, I think, today refer to them as bison, but in my culture and community, we always just say buffalo.
Before people started coming across the plains and across the continental United States, my estimates based on research would say that there was over 70 million buffalo.
Bison really managed to become the main grazer of the continent, and they stretched literally sea to sea. They became this linchpin in the ecosystem all across the continent.
There were millions of bison across North America before Europeans showed up, and they were part of subsistence strategies of many groups of people. Tribal nations utilized them in a variety of ways, but they would roam far and wide.
The bison was central to many indigenous economies across North America. And tribes like the Arapaho, the Cheyenne, reconfigured their societies in the late 1700s to become horse-mounted bison hunting societies. And it really allowed indigenous cultures to adapt to this new plains ecosystem and completely change their societies and their economies to focus on hunting one thing, the bison.
Before we had the horse, we were limited to the amount of area that we could walk. But once we got the horse, we were able to hunt and gather in a much greater area. And that's when we started really hunting the buffalo and using the buffalo.
We reached the zenith of our existence on the earth because of the buffalo. And once people started coming into our land, it started to destroy that relationship by destroying the buffalo, and it was really hard on us.
Because of pressure from Americans moving west, especially after the Revolutionary War, these tribes had to figure out a new way to make their economy work. And the combination of mounted horseback hunting with the incredible availability of these massive herds of bison really allowed them to create these thriving societies and become part of this massive international market for bison that stretched literally around the globe.
All those tribes that relied on the buffalo for everything, the teepees and sometimes weapons, utensils, and food, obviously. And so that was the primary source of the economy of a lot of our tribes, including the Kiowa. Originally we were from far up north, and we came moving through Montana into Colorado and ended up in Oklahoma. But as we were moving, we were right along the path of where all the large herds were. So it was very much important to us as well.
In the 19th century, the fur trade was really at its peak, but a shortage in cow leather goods ended up creating a massive demand for bison hides at exactly the same time as new industrial processes in the eastern United States were developed to more effectively process bison leather. And the combination of these factors really just led to an explosion in demand for bison hides. The bison went from being a linchpin of native economies to being a massive industrial enterprise. And, of course, for the native peoples, without access to manufactured goods of their own, things like bullets and metal cookware and knives and this kind of stuff, which became vital to their daily lives, just like it was for everyone else on the continent. The main mechanism for them to access those goods was exchanging bison robes. And for these peoples, the bison became absolutely central to their economy.
The worst thing that happened to Indian people in the Plains region was the discovery of gold in Colorado. 1858, you begin to see miners finding out that there's gold, and all of a sudden you have a rush in a very short period of time of 100,000 people coming to the Front Range.
Once the U.S. came in and discovered gold, they did all manner of policies and practices that would push Native peoples far away from the resource-rich area on the Front Range that so many of us live today.
When the colonization and westward expansion was just really, really rampant out west, they realized that a lot of the Plains Indians relied heavily on buffalo for food and shelter. And so one way of sort of attempt at cultural genocide was to mass kill a lot of the buffalo that existed during that time.
People like the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, the Comanche, they were extremely powerful nations, almost empires in and of themselves. And the United States Army realized very quickly that without any kind of economy, which was based in bison hunting, the tribes would collapse.
After 1858, everything changes, and it doesn't get any better. After 58, our relatives' lives changed dramatically.
And so they introduced policies and encouraged people to just kill bison without harvesting their meat or their hides or anything, simply because they knew that that would weaken the tribes on the plains.
It was a determined effort to destroy Indians, and that effort fell back on the buffalo too, because there was a decision made that they were going to try to exterminate both of us.
And so they began hunting them with large caliber rifles from moving trains, just a really industrial scale slaughter.
People would just come out and kill as many as they could and just leave them laying there. There's reports of men coming out and shooting 100 buffalo in one day and doing nothing but taking their tongues. It really changed our world dramatically. It went from being able to survive in a very comfortable environment on the plains and have a lot of success with food sources, to starting to struggle.
This demand on the bison from hunters came at exactly the same time as disease was running rampant through the herds. As Euro-American farmers expanded into the western United States, they brought along cattle, oxen, horses, that kind of thing. And of course they carry diseases like brucellosis, which then transferred to the bison. And so by the late 19th century, after the Civil War, the bison population had just collapsed at the same time as there was ever-increasing demand. And the bison was essentially wiped out.
And so it was really, really, really sorrowful and very sad, and just a huge tragic event to where all these buffalo were killed. They almost became extinct, except for maybe a few hundred.
So by the turn of the 20th century, you really just have tiny little pockets of bison living in really remote places in the western United States, places like Yellowstone and in Montana. And conservation groups were beginning to sound the alarm.
Early conservation started in the late 19th century, early 20th century. And then you also had tribes who had continued to try to cultivate herds, and there was a convergence of people who were concerned about conserving both the lands and the animals in North America and in the West in particular. And then there were some tribes as well. So there were small herds that were then revived.
The attitude had been, bison are unlimited, resources are unlimited in the West. And suddenly there's a recognition that, of course, that's not true, and that these things need intentional conservation, they need laws to protect them from overhunting, and policies that were aimed at keeping the species alive.
People are beginning to understand that we can't control Mother Earth. Mother Earth is going to control us. And so I think that it's almost imperative that we bring the buffalo back.
So Teddy Roosevelt, along with a number of conservation leaders in the early 1900s, began creating a series of parks and a series of reserves where bison would live without being able to be hunted.
But a lot of those herds, it took a long time for them to then be revived. But there are animals that went in various places, including just right outside of Denver.
For over 100 years, we have actually had this buffalo herd, which are direct descendants from the Yellowstone herd, some of the last bison that were on this continent. I'm Scott Gilmore. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Denver Parks and Recreation. So we are actually right by the bison pasture at Genesee Park. Genesee Park is one of our Denver mountain parks, and these herds traditionally have been a tourist attraction. People drive down I-70 and they're like, oh, there's buffalo. You know, so people stop just to look at them because, you know, they're a part of our history. They're a part of this country's history. And so people get excited about seeing them. And so we've worked incredibly hard to make this not a tourist attraction, but a conservation herd. We want to educate the public about the importance of these animals and how they tie to the land and the importance to indigenous people across this country.
I think it's important to teach the history of what happened to this animal that is one of the indigenous animals to this country and these lands, that they've been able to sort of resist genocide. And I find it quite interesting that, you know, what happened to the buffalo is almost what happened to my people.
We believe that the strength of the herds of buffalo who are coming back parallel our existence. We will never be strong as a people again until we have the buffalo back.
The two herds that we manage on the two properties, Daniels Park and then here at Genesee, are approximately between 60 to 70 adult bison. About 30 to 40 young calves are born every year in the two different herds. And so historically what we would do is actually auction those off. And then you'd have ranchers and others come with their checkbook, and they'd come out here and they'd pay $1,000 to $2,000 for a bison or a buffalo.
Scott Gilmore had this great idea of, hey, let's give back to Native people. Instead of selling off these buffalo through auctions to, you know, ranchers, et cetera, let's look at it a little differently.
We were really starting to do a lot more work with some of the indigenous groups and tribes around Denver. So we're taking these buffalo, these bison, which are part of the land, and returning them home.
I see many of you looking and thinking about the future and the wonderment of this event. Well, we decided that it's not about us here in the present, but it's about the future of our young.
The bison has always been such a vital part of our cultural ways, and just to be able to bring them home is a big deal for us, and we're excited to continue to grow our herd and also to introduce the bison back into our everyday lives. So in a way, we're reclaiming our Arapaho identity because it's a big part of our ways. It's who we are as Arapaho people.
You're okay, baby.
So being able to reclaim the buffalo and being able to reclaim the bison is a big moment for us because it's taking back what was taken from us.
For centuries, this country has subjected different races of people to slavery, to internment, to just downright wrongs. I don't know how else to say it. And I want to acknowledge that. And so what this work has done, just allow us to try to build some trust and just really try to move forward in a positive manner.
Today we celebrate that 35 bison will be transferred to Native American tribes to help establish, support, and sustain conservation herds across the United States. We are proud to honor the historic and cultural connections between bison and the tribal communities through this transfer.
Thank you everybody for being here. I
really appreciative to Scott Gilmore for setting this up and really working with the American Indian community in Denver to make this happen. This has been very special and a long time coming.
As long as we have these herds, we need to transfer the buffalo to tribal members across this nation, because there are lots of reservations, there's lots of indigenous groups that would love to be able to create herds and return their family members back to their ancestral homes. We actually put an ordinance forward that allows and requires now the city of Denver to transfer the buffalo to indigenous partners that we work with.
Anytime you can take a buffalo out of one area and move it back to a tribe, and if that tribe is committed to having a good relationship with that buffalo and they want to treat it like a relative, then that's awesome. That's what we want. That's the kind of thing that we need to see going on in greater scales.
When I see the buffalo out on the pasture, I just feel a surge of connection and spiritual strength. And it's a very satisfying feeling to know that we are restoring something so sacred to us. I'm Dr. Stacy Oberly, and I'm a member of the Southern Ute tribe, and I'm also one of our representatives for the Intertribal Bison Council. The Intertribal Buffalo Council was formed in 1992 as a nonprofit organization, and our tribe was one of the 7 founding members.
The way it all started was a group of us went to the stock show here in Denver, and there was this American Bison Association that was having their annual meeting, and we were sitting there looking around, and we looked one way and we looked the other way, and here there were other Indians in there. And we had a discussion about creating our own organization.
Since we had bison, our buffalo, since the 80s, we really needed this cooperative help and support and kind of rallying power.
Somebody put together a proposal to create this organization called the Intertribal Bison Council. And pretty soon, there was 7 or 8 tribes, and then there were 15 tribes. And I think today there are 46 tribes or more that are all part of this restoration effort.
The Bison Council is really advocating for the return of bison to our tribal lands. So the council, once it got together, it was a great resource for us.
I think it's extremely important for especially indigenous peoples to be able to utilize some of the same things our ancestors had. So the buffalo, they are important to our way of life. I think there are spiritual aspects of the bison that we can learn from in terms of strength and courage and things like that are very important historically. And then of course a healthy food source and being able to use, again, the hides and the different things that we need, especially since we're moving people. Let me see. My name is Crystal Rizzo, and I am a member of the Southern Ute Indian tribe. I am the current director of the Cultural Preservation Department here at Southern Ute. Yeah, so here's the maps. So here is the state of Colorado, and so we were hunting all throughout Utah, New Mexico, and so this is our sort of traditional lands that we recognize still. Although now we are, of course, on the reservation down in this area, and then Mountain Ute are to the west of us. When we were moved here, we didn't have access to be able to hunt bison anymore, so that's also something that's really important with us being able to have our own herd and being able to manage that.
I think to really understand the relationship between our tribe and the buffalo, it's important to talk about our history. So according to our creation stories, we didn't migrate. We were placed here in the Rocky Mountains by the Creator. And so we were in small family bands following the migration of the animals, hunting and gathering. And a huge part of our ceremonial life is our Southern Ute Sundance, which happens every summer. And buffalo are very important for that ceremony. They're a symbol of strength, not only physical strength, but also spiritual strength and endurance. And to us, they're very sacred.
I think all living beings are connected. And I think when we continue to show respect and take care of what we've been given, I think that the Creator blesses you and blesses your people. And there's so much to learn from the different beings that are around us.
It's about having our own sovereignty on how we want to take care of our land in a good way, how we want to keep our spiritual traditions alive and growing for our younger generation, and just an act of saying we're Native and we deserve to have this important part of our food chain, our natural environment, and our spirituality here in abundance for us and our people.
My name is Jesse Lassiter. I'm the bison herd manager for the Southern Ute tribe, and my job is to keep the herd happy, healthy, and inside the fences. I'll turn off the truck. You can hear them talking. So that grunting is the mama's talking to the babies. They know who's who, and that's how they find their mom, is through their grunting. Back when I started in 2015, the herd was about 31 animals. We started buying animals and integrating a breeding program. And in 4 years, we were able to bring it up to about, over 100 head and been able to maintain it at that, all while, still maintaining a harvest schedule to provide meat to the tribal membership.
Currently, we have a bison meat distribution program, and that's important because it's healthier for our community. We have a lot of diabetes, and so having high protein, low fat meat to feed our families is really important.
A tribal member will come in and they'll say, I'm looking to pick up my bison meat, so we'll walk them through, and we've got a variety of cuts. So we've got roasts that come all various sizes. Here's a boneless shoulder roast. So with that meat distribution program, tribal members can come in and get 5 pounds of bison meat per household per month for free. A lot of it's steaks, roasts, stew meat. I try to mix it up. We get ribs in there once in a while, bones, soup bones.
I'm really proud of, I think, the work that has gone into strengthening and building our herd, where we've even grown to be able to offer meat year-round. That wasn't always the case, but now we can do that. And I really believe that being able to practice your culture is preventative to all sorts of other things that impact Native people, especially Southern Utes. And so being able to learn about healthy, nutrition. Bison meat is much healthier than beef. And so teaching different recipes that are some traditional sorts of recipes, but also ways to integrate that meat today, I think is really important.
Food is what brings us together, and for Native peoples, that is our survival. And I don't mean from a consumption standpoint. I mean, food is what's maintained us and kept us here. My name is Ben Jacobs. I am the co-owner, co-founder of Tokabe American Indian Eatery. I'm a member of the Osage Nation, which is located in Northeast Oklahoma. And buffalo were so much a part of the diet of many Native communities prior to contact. Then after that, it became a source of kind of destruction. It was how can we kind of rid these animals of the land, because then it can take away a main food source of Native peoples. And so it's a very sad history, but they're a really unique creature that we still have. And to be able to bring that back and support that growth in a very sustainable, thoughtful way is really important. So that's why it was really important for us to incorporate that and to really make sure that we support the bison ranchers, and the caretakers of the land in Colorado and beyond.
We eat bison to restore bison, and we have a goal of 1 million head in the United States. Right now there's 450,000 bison. So farmers and ranchers, by raising them for meat production, and the more consumers that eat a bison burger and a bison steak are helping bring the species back.
It seems silly when you're in a restaurant, it's like, well, we serve this for people to eat, but that was our sustaining food for a very long time, and it's something that can continue the existence of that with having care and actually caring about the animal rather than the destruction of the animal.
Come on, big girl. I'm Rex Moore. I'm the owner of Rock River Ranches. We are in Ray, Colorado, where I'm finishing out some of my bison. Rock River Ranches is a bison production company. And whether it's meat production, breeding stock, and even selling all the pieces parts. So all things bison is what I sell and produce with this herd.
Justin, you good? Yep, we're good.
Today we are going to be checking visual ear tags, EIDs or electronic identification. Then we're going to give them their pre-breeding shots and we're giving them a dewormer as well.
Good.
So it's prepping for good health for the coming breeding season and out on grass. Come on, big girl. Come on, get up, baby. We'll actually be weighing them today. Weight?
890.
890, okay. My average cow herd weight size is about 1,080 pounds to 1,100 pounds, kind of in that range. A calf, when it's born, is going to be between 40 and 60 pounds, very small. A mature herd bull that is 5 years and older is going to weigh 2,200 to 2,700 pounds. This is a hydraulic livestock chute for both cattle or bison, but it's been specially adapted for bison with this head gate on it. We have a black plastic tarp on this because a bison won't hit or try to go through something that's solid. And we need to work them through the chutes so that we can take better care of them. You have to remember that bison are still more wild than they are domesticated. They are trainable. They can be gentle, but they are still a very large, powerful animal, and so you have to be careful. The cowboys here all have flags. We don't use whips, we don't use electronic hot shots or anything like that. So it's all about proper animal handling and safe handling, and the flags seem to work really good with bison. To become a bison rancher, you have to have the passion and the interest in raising bison. And it's going to take some investment on facilities because you need taller fences, you need stronger corrals, you need bigger chutes to work them in. After that, once they're out on the range, they're actually easier to take care of than cattle. So we're grass-fed, grain-finished. And that helps provide consistency and quality flavor, tenderness. So it's all about tenderness, taste, quality, and that bison eating experience.
We've had an amazing relationship with Rex Moore over at Rock River for probably a decade now. And that's why it's great to have that relationship with Rex, is not only can we talk about the food, but we can talk about the people that put their hands on where the food comes from. Tokabe American Indian Eatery came out of an idea that my business partner, Matt Chandra, and I had, and it was really about why native foods wasn't readily available on a daily basis outside of community events, family gatherings, powwows, things like that. And really what we wanted to do was create that in the culinary restaurant environment.
This is our braised bison. We braise it overnight. I want to say this is our most flavorful meat that we have. Super tender. It is so good.
Having bison available to eat is incredibly important on many levels. I mean, if we just look at the very surface level, it's a highly nutritious red meat. But from us also, from a cultural standpoint, it is about being able to say that this was and still is our animal, and an animal that's deeply rooted in our communities.
A lot of indigenous communities use the buffalo in different ways. Obviously for food, it's such a healthy protein and a food source for our people that has been in our DNA for a long time. So having that reconnection to indigenous foods back into our systems has been so important.
Hi, how are you doing? What can I get for you?
Should I have the bison?
The shredded or the ground?
Shredded.
For us, it's the stories of where it comes from and why we still utilize it, making sure that people understand that food is not just about being a superfood. It's about the origin of where it comes from, the history of where it comes from.
They're such a godsend to our indigenous communities. They are all about sourcing and providing indigenous foods to the community, whether you're native or not native. And what's really cool is that they do traditional rices and vegetables and things that were indigenous to the lands, you know, before things got replaced with other crops, etc.
Stuffed up?
When people come in and it's a native restaurant, they're like, what is Osage hominy salsa? What does braised bison look like? What is Eco's green chili stew? Like, what are these things? So we wanted people to be able to see the food. We wanted engagement with our crew because it's something that they can be connected to and something that they can speak to and have passion about and show up to work and have someone that may not look like them, someone's of a different age bracket, to actively be interested in them and what's this and their community and their identity. Especially for us, making it a part of our communities again, that people understand that it's important to our culinary experience, which is important to our cultural identity.
Because it's just so important for our health and our well-being to really get that food source and that sovereignty of food sovereignty back into our systems and back into our communities that was stolen from us. My name is Danielle Seawalker. I am Hunkpapa Lakota from the Standing Rock Sioux Nation of North Dakota, but I currently reside in Denver, Colorado. I'm an artist. I'm kind of an activist, which I say artivist. Right now we are on campus at CU Boulder in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm working on a mural centered around the buffalo. I had gotten a random email from a student who is part of the indigenous student body populations and clubs and organizations, and she had mentioned that they wanted to have some more indigenous representation here on campus, and so I was tasked to do that in the engineering building. So I'm able to sort of do that for the indigenous students and faculty here on campus. There is an indigenous student body here, but it's almost like nobody would really know that. There's nothing that conveys that indigenous students are here learning. And my whole intent on conveying indigenous people is through our indigenous knowledge, our ancient indigenous knowledge. And also I couldn't help myself but to do a buffalo, knowing that their mascot is also the buffalo too.
Seeing bison and buffalo on campus has become so normalized. I mean, it's in the water almost at CU Boulder, and really in the West in general. I mean, you see bison all over in the Rocky Mountain West.
To me, there's no animal that's more iconic in the American West than the bison. It symbolizes so much about what Americans want to see in themselves, what they wanted to see in their own history, how they made sense of what was happening around them in the West.
Bison in many ways symbolize the conflicting ideas about the West. That on the one hand, the West is a place to be conquered and tamed, but on the other hand, it has always been this place of respite and beauty and wildness, quote unquote wildness. And so how can you hold both of those things at once? Well, bison have always kind of symbolized and represented those competing narratives of the West.
The bison has always reflected Americans' attitudes towards nature and the way they thought about the natural world, especially in the West.
Nothing about the history or contemporary life in the West is simple. It's all quite complex, like much of human life. So it feels important to have the discussion about bison because in many ways I think they also symbolize where we're at today with how we manage this contested space of the Western US and how we try to find our way forward with a lot of really different ideas about how we should manage the land and manage people and manage animals. And that to me feels like a reason why we should continue to focus on bison. It's not just because it's cool to see a giant animal run out on the football field.
Ralphie is the live mascot for the University of Colorado. She runs on Folsom Field before the Colorado Buffaloes play, and she's also a bit of a local celebrity.
Oh, touchdown, Ralphie! Touchdown, Colorado! How about that, man?
Running a live buffalo, when you think about it, I mean, you're sitting there in Folsom and you're getting all hyped up, you're in your locker room, you're getting ready, you come out, and there standing in front of you is really in my mind, the animal that embodies the American West. And it's not only that, but it's our national mammal. And so it is all things true Americana, excitement.
Ralphie is Colorado. She is Boulder. She is what draws people together. You know, no matter what's happening in the football world, the athletics world, they come into Folsom Field for Ralphie the buffalo.
You know, it's not normal for a buffalo to go out in 50,000 people, but she loves doing it. She's super brave when she does it, and I think that transfers to the student population.
In 1966, they actually had a buffalo calf that they had on the sidelines, and in 1967 is when the tradition of Ralphie running and leading the football team out onto the field began. So we are Division I varsity athletes, which is a fantastic experience for all of our student athletes that we have on our team.
The current Ralphie we have is almost 1,000 pounds. She takes a lot of strength and a lot of speed to handle. So the handlers train year-round at least twice a week. They do an hour of sprint training, conditioning training, and then an hour of weightlifting.
Good, Alec.
One of the reasons we do so much training is to prevent injuries. And so if you're in the weight room, like, I need a lot from you, and I need you to always be out there and giving it your best shot.
Ralphie 5, who's in the photo behind me, in her prime, could run up to 25 miles an hour. Ralphie 6, who's our current mascot, is still growing. She's probably running about 20 miles an hour right now.
A lot of what I'm focusing on is teaching them how to listen when the animal is telling you what they want. And so it's little things like, okay, you know, you see her move this way. She did that because when you stepped in really quickly and closely to her space, she felt uncomfortable. So how else can we approach this so that she feels comfortable and you know what she wants?
Ralphie and I are very close. I kind of helped raise her. We got her as an orphan buffalo from a ranch estate over. So I've known her since she was about 4 months old.
Having been raised so differently as an orphan, people are what she loves. And so she sees people and that's who she wants to spend time with. And so I'll be out there at her ranch and we clean up her pastures every single day and we're out there and we do enrichment every single day. It's always important to remember that especially with these more tame animals, they are still unpredictable. They are still 850 pounds. And so you can't get wrapped up in the idea that she's your friend and forget about your safety procedures. You know, I grew up with a background in cattle and I've learned so much about buffalo that they are just very, very different. They're significantly more unpredictable. They are still very wild at heart. And so I think that we get some mixed feedback, honestly. There are some people who come in and think that this is fantastic and they love this and they really, really support us. And there are others that wish that we would not do what we do. And I think that the important thing to remember is that we do love these animals. We do appreciate and respect how important they are to not only this community, but other communities throughout the world.
The buffalo are the most sacred animal to me and our people. And you know, that symbiotic relationship that we had with the buffalo also goes all across the environment. The prairie dogs love the buffalo. The grass loves the buffalo. The way the buffalo don't eat grass down to the stubs, they make it so that it renews itself. Buffalo wallows create water collection areas in harsh areas where there's no water, so that when there is water, you know, it creates those kinds of environments.
Their hooves churn the soil and help recycle nutrients. Their hooves also will make little microclimates for the native seeds who are adapted to this type of a climate to establish and grow. So they're a very important species to the prairie ecosystem, and so we wanted to make sure that they were included in this restoration effort as well.
This is the Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge, just 10 miles northeast of downtown Denver in Commerce City, Colorado. Bison have a very definite ecological history and purpose on prairies. So we just figured that bringing bison in would help bring back the ecology that was missing here for years.
This refuge was established back in 1992 when Congress passed the Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge Act, which set the groundwork for turning this area into a refuge.
The refuge itself is 15,000 acres. The bison currently we have on about 6,300 acres and hope to have up to about 11,500 acres. We have a 10, 12 mile wildlife drive that people can drive around to see all the wildlife.
I just always love watching the bison, especially on days like today where it's a little cloudy or a little cooler out. You see that they really enjoy this cooler weather. It's just really neat to see them in their natural environment like that.
We are really hoping that we are a place where people in the urban communities here can come experience wildlife and nature and really find their place in this natural environment. A few times a week I take walks at the Rocky Mountain Arsenal and I'm able to see the buffalo, and it's just really special. I don't know, I feel like there's a connection, and I just hold them in really high regard, and I have a lot of respect for who they are, what they represent, and how they are just the providers to my people. We're hoping to continue to conserve bison in their historical landscapes and really help use that traditional ecological knowledge, that indigenous knowledge, to help with managing these bison into the future. I feel like even going into the future, what happens to them is going to happen to us because we are so connected and they are part of our nation. And the fact that they've survived this attempt of almost being extinct is very similar to what happened to our people. And I think talking about it and keeping that alive is very important.
It's a very complex, difficult history, but for us, when we look at it now, the buffalo is still returning. And what's so unique about bison is how they raise themselves, is that they live off of the land. They're very much, even now, still kind of a wild animal.
I think as a Native American, having buffalo back on our landscape is really empowering. To see them and be near them, you just feel a surge of connection and spiritual strength and awe, because they're majestic creatures. They really are majestic.
Restoration of buffalo is a challenge for all of us in America. It's an important challenge, and it's something that needs to be done not just for American Indian people, but for everybody.
And so if we can get to bison 1 million, and it might take 20 years, then we've helped bring this species back from extinction. And the more people I can help get into the bison industry, that means there's more bison being raised and we're closer to bison 1 million, because then they'll never go away.
So the refuge is part of that greater initiative toward conserving bison. We are, of course, a small component of the bigger picture, right? We can't do this alone. We can't do this in a vacuum. We have to all work together to conserve bison in their native landscape.
My hope for the future is that we as Indigenous people will embrace the sovereignty that we have inherently to reestablish our food systems that are more healthy for our communities, and also to be advocates for having the bison available in an aspect that is respectful to them as spiritual beings on this earth, because they are strong spiritual living beings and they need to be respected.
None of us own the wildlife. The wildlife is just part of the earth, and we're all just part of the earth. And when I stand here, I'm not standing here as overseer of these buffalo. I'm just here as part of this planet. And so I think people need to really change how they perceive themselves on this earth.
My message to all people, if you really want to make a difference in the world, find a way to bring buffalo back. If you want to make a difference in this world, bring buffalo back.